Welcome back to Get Some Service Now. In today's episode, our guest is Pratik Bhatt. He's a senior product manager in the security space at ServiceNow. In today's episode, we're going to talk about ACLs. If you're a ServiceNow administrator or if you're new to ServiceNow, this is a really good episode to get an understanding of some of the concepts and technical concepts around ACLs, how they operate, and some of the new features that have come out in the Xanadu and Yokohama release relating to ACLs. I also have, you'll see a link below and on the screen, a link to an ACL course if you are looking to get your skills up on ACLs and find one location where you can find all information in one easy to access place. Have a look at the teachable course, it's all there for you. I hope you enjoy this episode. So Pratik, just maybe if you give us a little bit of an introduction of who you are and your role at ServiceNow, and then we'll get into things.
Yes, so my name is Pratik Bhatt. I'm a senior principal product manager in ServiceNow. I'm responsible for access control, which includes users, roles, groups, ACLs, secure data filters. I started my journey as an engineer in ServiceNow. I was an engineering manager for a couple of years and then moved to product management because I love my job right now and I've always wanted to be a product manager. So that's how that's my journey in ServiceNow, and that's how I landed into PM role. And we'll be mostly discussing about access controls and other parts of access enforcement over the next few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, access controls are one of those core things that as a ServiceNow engineer or administrator you need to get a handle on. How did you learn ACLs? Like, how did you get started with them?
So I think in general, in terms of for our customers and for our community, developer community, I think I recommend to start with ACL training. We do have a great training on the Now Learning, so on the ACLs and how you can secure the data. So start with ACLs, read the documentation, reach out to learn a lot of good articles on the LinkedIn and like MVPs like you and other MVPs of ServiceNow. They have been posting a great insights on LinkedIn. So follow those folks to get a lot of insights into best practices. And in the end, I would suggest like start with a simple use case. ServiceNow do provide a great benefit of PDI, right? Request a personal development instance. Start with simple use case and just get hands-on. Start building something, securing data, and that's how you learn about ACLs, right? In general, always think about make it simple. So initially, when you're working with ACL, always make sure that you have use cases. You are trying to understand the use cases that has roles and security attributes. Don't go into the scripting part yet, because when it goes into scripting, it becomes more complex too, more advanced. So start with the simple, start with the basic, complete your training, follow MVPs and other creators on the ServiceNow platform. Look for community blogs, and that's how I would recommend someone to start with access controls and basics of access control.
So there is a lot of information out there around ACLs, like you said, LinkedIn, the community, the developer site, those sort of. So get out there and have a look and read some of that information and find some of that information out there. And on the Now Learning as well. You're saying there's also some Now Learning courses available.
Yes, and as a platform team, we also do a lot of academy sessions. So you can, I think it's open for everyone. So you can subscribe, you can join and show interest into those academy sessions, and you'll find a lot of insights on the different parts of the platform. Right now, just not ACL. So today morning, I did an academy session on what's new in Xanadu and Yokohama release. So it will be posted on the YouTube. So we do have a lot of content on the YouTube too from ServiceNow side, right? So the ServiceNow, we also publish a lot of community blogs, articles, documentation, academy sessions, Now Learning. So with ServiceNow plus other content from everywhere on different medium, I think we have a lot of content on the ACL. But until you put yourself in a position where you're trying to build ACLs, it's hard to just theoretically learn everything. So I would recommend everyone to request PDI, take simple use case, and start building things.
Yeah, I think it's actually a lot broader, I think, than a lot of people think. The ACLs. I mean, there's the there's the basic, you can restrict something with a role, but really there are a whole heap of different permutations or ways that you can use ACLs. I guess one of the things to talk about would be some of the new things that came out in Xanadu. There's a couple, maybe we'll get to these, but query ACLs, something which are new, and they've got a particular sort of security purpose in locking down particular type of an attack through searching. The applies to field, which is new on ACLs, which I'm assuming is a like a performance tool by limiting the scope where your ACLs run. And then decision type, which is a deny, default deny, or a default sort of allow to operate. Maybe on the decision type, because that's a new one. Can you maybe just tell us a little bit about that and how to use that?
Yes, we were discussing today morning, right? When it comes to broad nature of the ACLs, ACLs are your friends. ACL is your friend. It's not an enemy. It's simple to understand, but sometimes if you practice more, it's simpler to master. We have a lot of tools to help with debugging and troubleshooting and everything. So ACL is your friend, and there are 4 key components of ACL. I will jump into the decision type, but just wanted to give a broad understanding of there are 4 key components of ACLs: roles, security attributes, data conditions, and script. And when you define the ACL, you use these 4 components to define your access control strategy, right? And you can overlap multiple ACLs and have this multiple access control strategy that will either allow or deny access to the data, right? Now, up till now, we have been in ServiceNow, we always have allow if ACL. That means you are allowed to access the data if conditions are met, right? But now with a new introduction of decision type, we split the decision into 2 separate categories: allow if and deny unless. So deny unless allows you to explicitly deny access to the data until conditions are met. The 4 conditions are the same: roles, security attributes, data condition, and script. But it's explicit denial. So and deny ACL is very powerful. That means deny ACLs gets evaluated on the top in the evaluation hierarchy. And if there is any deny ACL that restricts access to the data, there is no allow ACLs, or none either deny ACLs grant access to the same data. So it's very powerful in nature. And if you have multiple deny ACLs, those are like, in terms of Boolean terminology, those are ended together. That means all the deny need to pass your request further. And then all the allow ACLs are evaluated, which are all together. So either one of the allow ACL passes, you get an access to the data, right? So it's very powerful, and we introduced it in Xanadu. It's not a replacement of anything. It's a complementary control, means you mix, match, allow, and deny, create a best access control strategy. For example, like if you want to protect, let's say, sensitive information, then you don't want your external users or unauthenticated users to access the data, right? And you also don't want anyone that does not have a role to access the data. So you create a deny ACL, says deny access to my sensitive information unless user has this role or is authenticated and is internal employee, for example. That's a pure denial criteria. And then you further create more allow ACLs that I want to grant access to specific category of sensitive information to specific role, specific category to specific role. So you create multiple allow criteria on top of it, but your deny criteria is very specific. So I don't want to give access to this specific criteria at all.
So is the deny all decision type that has been introduced, is that effectively a tightening up of security, really? Because it kind of gives you, in the past, it has been a case of if you meet the criteria, you're allowed access. And I guess in the past, if there was no criteria or ACLs at all protecting something, that you would ultimately end up in a position where you would be allowed access. Now those things are sort of turned around in a way so that you're denied access unless you have the roles or security attributes to allow you there.
Yeah, I think even in the previous releases or previous version, you are able to achieve this some of the use cases. But we, with the introduction of deny ACL, we reduce that complexity. We reduce the learning curve, steep learning curve on how to do this, right? It's also it also provides you that clear mindset where I want to deny access to this criteria and I want to allow access to this criteria, right? So you can split that understanding into deny model and allow model. But and yes, definitely it improves the security posture. It enhances the security to next level for sure. But we also introduce this concept to for reducing the complexity, make it simple for someone to create a right access control strategy based on the criteria.
Yeah, and so just for people to be aware, you can combine protecting an object within ServiceNow with these default deny ACLs and with the allow if, the traditional ones. So in that case, you were saying the deny ACLs are evaluated first. If there were, let's just say there were 3 deny ACLs protecting a record or a table, if any one of those fails, then you're denied access. If all of them are passed, then your allow if ACLs will be evaluated. And with the allow if ACLs, let's again say there are 3 of them. If any one of those is passed, you will gain access to
Yes.
object being protected.
Yes, that's correct. It's not a replacement of allow if ACL, but it's like added layer on top of it. In terms of ACL hierarchy evaluation, we do go if you don't find allow ACL, we go up the ladder and says parent ACLs and base ACLs and all those things. But still, it's not a replacement of it. So with existing allow ACL, it's complemented to create deny ACL, right? And with deny ACL, it's always you need to have allow ACL. That's a recommended approach.
Yeah, the ACL hierarchy is, I think, something for new admins. That's something they need to get their head around there. That ServiceNow will look, if you're protecting a record in a table here, then if you don't have an ACL protecting that table, if that table has a parent table, then ServiceNow will look at the parent table and say, are there ACLs protecting this? And then if there wasn't something on the parent table, there might be at a higher level a star ACL, which will apply to any table and any field. And so I know that ServiceNow, I think it may have been in Xanadu, introduced a few more star or sort of table.star ACLs at that top level so that there is like a security blanket there for you. If you somehow manage to remove some ACLs from a table somewhere down here lower in the hierarchy, there's something up here which will do a check and say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be allowed access here.
Yes, and it's a little bit challenging for a new administrators or a new developers if you are coming to the service ecosystem as someone from outside, right? If you have not worked with service ecosystem for a long time, then it's a little bit challenging for them to understand the ACL hierarchy. But to simplify it, I'll try to simplify it. Like we have 3 different types of ACLs, or also 3 category of ACLs we can call. Base ACLs, which we call star ACLs or table.star ACLs. Those are base ACLs. Then you have table level ACLs, and then you have field level ACL. So when user requests a resource, or whether the user is trying to access a table, the ACL engine will evaluate based on certain hierarchy. Says, okay, you're trying to access incident table. Let me find if I find table level ACLs matching to incident table, right? If we found the match, we evaluate the ACL. If we don't found the match, and if this table is extended from, let's say, task table in this case, then we go up the ladder and says, oh, do we find the matching task table ACLs, right? And enforce on the incident. If we don't find those parent level ACL, then we still go up the ladder and say, let me just enforce the base system ACL. And that's where we are hardening a lot out of box, where we want to make sure that our customers are secure out of box, and we elevate the security to the next level. And once the table level ACLs are evaluated, that's where we go into the field level ACL. Says, now you have access to the incident table, but let me check now, do you have access to each column on the incident table? And then we try to see, do we find a matching ACLs? And we follow the same hierarchy. Says, if not match found, we go to the parent level. If not, then base ACLs. Generally, field level ACLs do not have a lot of base system ACLs, but might have parent ACL, because as a service now we don't understand out of boxes which column you want to protect, or what kind of data you are storing in those columns, right? But customers have been creating a lot of field level ACLs to protect their sensitive information and everything. But the hierarchy is the same. We try to match the ACLs on the resource which you are requesting. If not found, we go to the parent level. If not found, then our base system ACLs will kick in over here.
Yeah, I've always found it a way to sort of conceptualize it is like a house, and then with rooms within a house. So the house is like your table ACL. There's a front door with a lock, and if you've got the key and you can get into the house. But now to get to the fields are the rooms, and you need to then be able to pass the ACLs or have the key to get into the room. And using a combination of field level ACLs and table.star ACLs, you can allow access to one room within the house, but deny it everywhere else. Or
yes, exactly. It provides a lot of flexibility for someone to choose their use cases. Like it is very flexible framework for sure.
Yeah. So the query ACLs, I think, came out in Xanadu as well. They're interesting because what I found interesting about them is that they protect against a particular type of attack on data, where I think the examples are, I might have access to see a table and I can see my record within the table because it relates to me, but without, say, a query ACL, I could issue a query on that table to maybe look for a range of records. I think the example is given, like, let's just say there was a salary field in a table. I could see the table because I'm allowed to get down to see my record. But if I issued a query, I could say, tell me all of the people, or at least how many records are between $100,000 and $200,000, and get that information back, which I really shouldn't be able to see. But now query ACLs allow you to lock that sort of thing down as well.
Yes, query ACLs were introduced in order to make sure that we protect each query operation. So there are two different parts of the query ACLs, right? Query match and query range. That means you can enforce whether someone will be able to do operations like equal to, not equal to, or the query range will cover greater than, equal to, less than, contains, and everything, right? So things gets very interesting when you discuss about the non-contextual and contextual ACLs, right? So to simplify the context of non-contextual versus contextual, so you can also call it pre-query and post-query ACLs, right? Non-contextuals are pre-query. That means you enforce it via roles and secret attributes. You don't have to understand the data in order to enforce the access control. But when you use data conditions or script, in a script, if you use the current object, I'm going a little bit technical, but in a script, when you use current object, the ACLs becomes contextual, because now you are saying that I want to enforce access based on my data. So access control engine or ACL engine need to understand the data, in order to enforce the access control, right? So in the example that you mentioned says, there's an ACL on the employee table which says, as a user, only you should be able to see your salary, or as a manager, you should be able to see your team salary, right? Because you're a manager and you can see your reported salary. So what I'm saying is that I want to enforce an ACL, which is contextual ACL. That means at least first of all, there is a non-contextual part where I want to make sure that my employee is internal. I'm restricting unauthenticated access to the table, right? You created in ACL, but now you're creating allow ACLs on top of it and says, I want to enforce an access based on the data. Says if I'm accessing the data, I should be able to see only my record. Or if I'm a manager, then I should be able to see my report is record. So as a ACL engine, I need to always evaluate whether the particular record matches to the criteria or not. And that's where you will find information, or you'll find the list where some of the field values are empty, or most of the field values are empty, but you can only see field values related to your own records. And that's where you can use the filter criteria on top of it to do this analysis, and the list may either reflect on the record count or somewhere else, right? So that's why we introduced this query ACL to protect to those operations. So we always recommend that enforce a query ACLs on top of your read ACLs, Even if you want to exactly replicate the read ACLs, still it's good, but it's always good to have query ACLs. And query ACLs are very powerful to protect a sensitive columns and fields where you have this contextual understanding of who should see the data and who should not see the data. We are also have released a new Yokohama update called security data filters, which is more powerful also. Like it will allow you to define the inquiry filter criteria, right? For example, now let's take the same example where you want to restrict employee record based on the user, or if you're a manager, you see your team record, right? You create a data filter, and we won't even retrieve the data from the database. Will only show you 6 records if you are a manager, and if your 5 reportees, then you can see your own record and 5 other folks on your team. So we won't even retrieve the data from the database. So we have also released a data filters in order to improve that security of the platform.
So data filters are something you can use in conjunction with your ACLs, and the data filters apply first in that they will actually restrict information coming out of the database to you. Is that correct?
So ACLs, non-contextual ACLs based on the roles and attributes are enforced on first, and then data filters will be appended to the query. Because if you don't have access to the resource, then there is no point in querying the resource, right? So data filters are in the middle of the layer where we make sure that first of all, whether you have access to the data or not. If yes, then let's apply the filter criteria based on 2 modes. We have released if mode, means filter if conditions are met, or filter unless conditions are met. So that's the second layer of that funnel. So I think that gives us a very interesting discussion, because I've been presenting this guiding principle at multiple places in the platform, where always think about your ACLs and other access controls in the platform as a layered approach, and try to create a funnel out of it, right? Each layer reduces the chunk of the information, and eventually you will only show the information that is allowed, that, for example, right entity should be able to see the right data at the right time. So each layer reduces the scope of the data, and in the end, the final result should only be the correct data that can be accessible by a specific user.
So then data filtering and the new applies to field on an ACL, they perform a similar task but a different level of that filtering. Is that correct to say that?
So both look similar, but both serves a different purpose, because when you say applies to, that means you are targeting which data you want to apply this ACL on, right? For example, let's say task table. Task table is shared by multiple applications, right? And they have this category, says this task belongs to HR category, this task belongs to CSM category, this task belongs to finance category. So now the challenge was that if someone creates an ACL, they might have to write a script and says, I want to enforce based on this data context, right? So what we say that, okay, we're introducing this applies to. That means you can pick your data criteria where the ACL need to be enforced, right? So applies to defines where the ACL need to be enforced. Versus data filter is like filter the data for the user request. It does not determine whether where to apply, but it says that if user request passes, then apply this filter criteria.
So, so the applies to would operate as a contextual or post ACL because it has access to the data.
Yes.
So I just want to clear this up for people who are listening. Then, so the pre, which is a non-contextual ACL, post is a contextual ACL. The pre is when you are looking at, okay, have I got a role or perhaps a security attribute which will allow me to look at this data? And then the post, which is the contextual ACL, is when the record is available because I can see it. We've gone that far. Now we can look at the fields of the record, and based upon values within the record, make a further determination of, can I actually see this and work with that? So that pre and post, non-contextual and contextuals are things, a concept to have in your mind, I think.
Yes, that's correct. And I do have a diagram that clearly explains how we recommended the service now. I can show it if you would like to.
Yeah, and later on, if you want to send it to me later, I can put it onto the screen as well, so we can have it there for people to see maybe a little earlier in the conversation. Yeah, I can do that. Pratik, so let's go a little wider. So there's ACLs and there's the data filtering. What other elements of security are there in that sort of funnel that you talk about, or layers that you talk about in ServiceNow that you work with that are in your domain?
So, in the guiding principle of the funnel that I was discussing was mostly focusing on ACL part of it, right? Where you create a non-contextual ACL on the top with a combination of deny and allow. You add a filter to reduce your scope, and then you apply contextual ACL or not. The reason we added a filter in between is that because based on the filter criteria, also you might want to enforce certain contextual ACLs. Right? So that's what filter is in the second, right? But that guiding principle is more about how you think about your ACL layering. But overall, when you think about access management in the ServiceNow, it has three different pillars to it. The first is managing the role management, because it's very crucial. Unless you define the identity, like who has access to what, who need to be defined with the roles. So always make sure that you audit roles. Your roles are up to date. You don't have inactive roles. You don't have high privileged roles assigned to large number of users. So always make sure that you audit your roles assignment regularly. That once the role management is done, you focus on creating a right access control strategy with ACLs, and then apply data filter in the end to create your overall right access control posture. So it's very broad when it comes to access management in the platform. It's combination of role management, ACLs, access controls, and data filters, and combination of all those things is at your service to achieve your use cases and requirement.
Yeah, okay. So then, what security mistakes do you see customers making, or what challenges do you see customers doing? I'm thinking of things like there's the shared responsibility security model with ServiceNow, where there are things that ServiceNow do at the platform level in terms of protecting data and encryption on the device and all that. But then there are things that the end user, the administrators at a client site, needs to also be doing. I just wonder, what challenges do you see coming from the clients, or what errors do you see them perhaps making in securing and playing their role in that shared responsibility security model?
So I think having that, and I would say first thing is that not more ACLs are not like a sign of you have a great security, right? So make it security very simple, easy to understand for someone. When someone is auditing your ACLs or security, they should be easily understand what someone is trying to do. So more ACL does not mean it's more security. You can combine multiple allow ACLs into a single ACL and says, for example, if you have 10 ACLs enforcing 10 different roles, you might combine into one single ACL. It works the same way, but now it gives you a single picture on a single view on number of roles that can be used to access the data, right? So that's the first thing. More ACLs are not means more security. Complex ACLs are not means better security. That means there is not always a need of scripted ACL, right? Use scripted ACL only when it's necessary. Otherwise, try to use the remaining roles and security attributes. Security attribute is a good replacement of scripted ACL, because we have seen a lot of example where someone will create a script even if they don't have a need of current object, like even if they don't have a need to make a ACL contextual. So if you just want to enforce based on user criteria or environment criteria, for example, if user is authenticated, is a criteria combination of user and environment both, right? If you have those kind of requirement, move it to security attribute, because those are very performant, and you can define it once and enforce consistently across multiple ACL. You don't have to copy paste the same logic everywhere. So that's the second point. And also third is into more role management, where you might think about, oh, I need to assign this high privileged role to this user because user is not able to perform the task. And the question is that, do I need to assign the high privileged roles, or do I need to evaluate whether and whether I need to create a small granular role for that particular functionality for someone to perform that task, right? Not assigning the admin or high privileged role is not always a correct option. Evaluate your use case scenarios and make sure that you do a proper role management based on your persona or functionality.
So just to dig into that one, so you're suggesting that somebody needs to do something, and one way to give them access via an ACL would be to say, oh, let's give that person the admin role because they can do that with the admin role. But what might be a better approach would be to create a new distinct role with limited ability, so it doesn't have the full scope of admin ability, and then give that person that role and create the ACL that looks for that role to allow them to perform that task.
Yeah, exactly. Try to always think from the least privilege principle. Like, do I need to provide more privilege to this user beyond the scope of the task or beyond the scope of the work? And that will give us a kind of a good understanding of not assigning the high privilege role to a lot of users, because like you won't have a instance where you say like 50 users are administrator, right? There is something wrong with the settings if there is an instance with the 50 admin users.
Yeah, that's a good point. So your point there about for performance, if you do need to have a contextual ACL, and for whatever reason, you do need to use a script to maybe look in the data of the row to make a determination. How's the best way to go around that? Should you separate that into two ACLs? So maybe you have an initial ACL which says, oh, okay, you need to have the ITIL admin role, let's say, but even if you've got that, I want to have a look at some data and in a contextual sense to determine if you should then be allowed access to this. So how's the best way to do that? Would that be to put those two conditions together, to put the role and the script together on one ACL, which is then both a non-contextual pre-ACL and a contextual post-ACL, but let the role-based non-contextual pre-part operate first, because then it stops the contextual script running if it doesn't need to run. If you don't have the role, then this doesn't need to run in the first place. Would that be better than separating them out as two ACLs, one which is just a role-based one and then one which is a script-based one? Because I guess the script-based one will get executed then every time.
Yeah. No, I think it need to be one ACL, because if you split this into two ACL and if two ACLs are allowed if ACL, then either one of the ACL can grant an access to the data, right? So if you have tightly coupled condition with the role, and then still you want to evaluate based on the data context, it need to be one ACL, because the still role part will be evaluated as a pre-check and will make sure that the user, at least user has that ITIL role in order to access the data, and then further on, once that request returns the data, we will evaluate based on the conditions in the script.
Could that be an example of where you would use the decision type and make the first one, the role, a deny rule?
Yep. Yes. So the second strategy will be using a deny, and says I want to explicitly deny access to resource unless user has ITIL role. And then you can have allow ACLs, which can be contextual, one allow ACL. So that can be another strategy.
I think this is something which in the documentation that I've, like you've said, at community, online and LinkedIn, that I don't think comes out clearly, is that a single ACL can be both a pre-non-contextual ACL and a post-contextual one, because you can have on your ACL a role requirement that needs a role condition, and then you could have a script condition, and they sit on either side of that fence. And so one option might be to put them together like that if they're both going to be a decision type allow if, or separate them to make the role-based one, the pre-contextual one, a deny ACL, so that if they don't have the role, well, we're not going to waste any processing time looking at the contextual one because they can't go there anyhow. If they do have the role, okay, now we'll go and check to see if they meet those contextual requirements.
No, I think I agree with you. We are working on improving our documentation a lot. We started with some of the pages, and you will find more clarity and more use cases in our existing documents over the period of next 1 year and 1.5 years. ACL has been part of platform since inception, and we are trying to revamp a lot of existing documentation with a lot of these use cases which are easy to understand, right? We have great documentation on how ACL works, technically how ACL works and everything, like flow diagram and everything. But I think we will add more use cases and other non-technical aspect to it.
I think the ACL concept, I think it is very powerful. It's very granular. You can get down to restricting access to an individual field for a whole heap of reasons. I've always felt, though, that there is a bit of conceptual learning about how they operate, like a field level ACL, a table level .star ACL, the star.star, and the order in which they operate, and some of that doesn't perhaps really apply that often. It happens, and it's sort of opaque, sort of hidden from you. But there are times when you're going, hang on, I need to figure this out, and you really do need to understand exactly how that processing is occurring. I know a couple of years ago there were some changes made in ServiceNow to do some things like enforce ACLs have a role on them. Like we say, hey, if you don't have a role, we will. I think what was done was that ServiceNow enforced that an SNC internal role was applied to that ACL, so that at least there was some role. We had to at least check that you're an internal person. Do that. Do clients with old instances that have been around for a few years, do they encounter different challenges or problems that you see or that you're aware of in terms of what they might have done in the past with ACLs?
So far, I think the clients who have been with ServiceNow customers have been with ServiceNow for a long time. They have a lot of legacy ACLs or something around it, but it seems like they are in also a good state, because the use cases, the requirement they have achieved over the period of multiple years now put them in a stable state where they have this right requirement and all the ACLs created at the right places. But when we try to come up with a new features, or when you're trying to do something out of box, right? That's where we have to think about the migration path and how we make sure that we don't break existing customers who have been with ServiceNow for a long time. Even for not like, so if you're not with ServiceNow for last 10 years, but you recently use ServiceNow, we still have to make sure that we are not breaking your instance. So a lot of time, like recently, we shipped a lot of out of box controls, making it inactive. That means we don't want to break customer, but we are shipping this lot of out-of-box controls, ACLs and data filters, and then we added a new check in a security center, which will allow you to find those inactive controls so you can make it active based on your requirement and need, right? Because we have to balance it out, where we enforce strongly versus where we provide controls to customer and let them enable it. So that's a strategy we always take. We ship a lot of things out of box, but recently we started making it inactive and making sure that customers enable it in the end.
So that's an interesting one. That security center check where it allows you to look for inactive ACLs, and so a lot of those ACLs have been introduced by ServiceNow because, in some cases, or perhaps in a default case, they would be assumed to be a best practice to activate them and have them providing a layer of protection. But your client might have specific needs in that area where they don't want to do that. So your approach there would be to run that security center scan to identify those ACLs, and then what position would you take? Would you take the position that, if possible, activate those ACLs unless there is a reason to not use them? Or would you take the position of leave them inactivated unless you can think of some reason to activate them? Where would you suggest?
No, my position will be take a look at it and activate those ACLs, because we have thought about it and we try to come with the criteria which does not break your instance or possibly will have minimal impact, right? But still we were not sure, so we made it active. But my position will be take a look at it, review those ACLs and activate those ACLs. Because when we talk about deny ACLs, allow ACLs, query ACLs and everything from the customer perspective, then as a ServiceNow customer, you look towards ServiceNow and say, are you guys adopting it in your own product area, right? That's the question that we always get. And yes, that's why we added all these new ACLs to improve our out-of-box security for existing products. And each of these ACLs, I think the documentation is covered under each of the product area, what new ACLs were introduced and why those were introduced. So you'll find a lot of details and product documentation for each product area too. So my position will be review those ACLs and make it active. Like unless you have a stronger and you say I don't need this ACL. But as a service now, we always wanted to show that we are using our own controls also, within our product, and we are always looking for how we can elevate security.
So in that situation, then, if I'd run the security check, I'd found some of the ServiceNow ACLs that are inactive by default, and I'd like to activate them. Is there a simple way or a simple process or even a tool to let me determine if by activating that, I'm going to now be restricting people from doing things that they could before? How is...
Yeah, so we are going into troubleshooting and debugging kind of a territory, right? And recommendations always start with a sub-production instance because you can test in a better scenario over there. So start with sub-production. And we do have tools available to help with debugging and troubleshooting. Like, for example, Access Analyzer is a great tool. Once you activate the ACL, you can use Access Analyzer to see whether I break my current user, existing user or not, right? You can run who has access to what via Access Analyzer, and you can validate it quickly. If you're more technical, then we do have security debugger logs, security debugger, which you can open it and see my ACL is passing or not, or my ACL is failing for a specific user by impersonating it and other criteria. So we do have a lot different options based on your need to test out these ACLs once you start activating it, right? But start with some production, start with small step, maybe one specific product area by product area, and then use these tools to understand the impact to your instance.
Yep. Okay. Pratik, is there anything, I know that there may not be, but is there anything new and exciting or that you're excited about in your field that is coming in the area of security that you're able to talk about today? Or we put that off for another show, whatever?
I think we introduced a lot of new innovations and new features in last two releases, Xanadu and Yokohama, right? And one of the features that we have not discussed so far is the related record access. That definitely, I think it's a great way to enforce access based on relation. So now let's take an example where you are a user of SP, strategic portfolio management, right? And you have this product which has portfolio. Portfolio has multiple projects attached to it. One project can have multiple cost plan, risk, task attached to it. Now, as a owner, you want to make sure that you want to enforce access consistently from the parent to child. That means from portfolio to the cost plan. So if I access to the portfolio, then I should be able to access related projects attached to that portfolio. If I access to the project, then I should be able to access related cost plan, risk, and everything. Prior to related record access, you have to duplicate this logic into multiple ACLs and multiple tables, right? But now what you can say that, okay, you create a ACL on the project table and says, I want to get my access enforcement from the portfolio because portfolio is referenced in the project. So you create an ACL with a control by reference equal to portfolio. And if you have access to portfolio, you will get related access to projects based on portfolio. And same thing you can create for cost plan task. So that's a great enhancement where you can delegate your access and say, I want to get my access based on this reference column. If I have access to the data, I should be able to access related records for that one, right? So that is something is already part of your Yokohama release. And I think it's one of the new innovation that I'm very excited about.
In that example, that is interesting. Just in that example, just to clarify then, so if you have an ACL at the portfolio level, and then beneath the portfolio, you have a reference to a project, and the project has a reference to a cost, let's say, or cost center. If your ACL at the portfolio level is passed by a user, does that ACL grant access to each of those children tables going down like that, or do you need to create a number of ACLs at the portfolio level, like one for project and one for cost center? How does that operate?
So in order to get an access to project, right, you need to have a ACL at the project level and reference it to portfolio. So let's say assume that at portfolio level you have an ACL says deny access to data unless user is internal, because you don't want external user to access the portfolios, right? So deny access unless user is internal and is authenticated and is interactive session. For example, interactive session determines whether you are doing a login from the UI versus not from the API access, right? So if you have this criteria, and now you create allow ACLs on portfolio, says allow access to ACL if user has a role program manager, developer, product manager, project manager, you are allowed to access portfolio. Now you create a contextual ACL which says deny access to data if unless user belongs to this department or whatever, right? You create some contextual ACL which says, okay, you are only able to access portfolio related to your own department or your own business unit. So once your portfolio ACLs are ready, if your user navigates to portfolio, what will be the criteria? User need to be internal, authenticated, interactive session, should have either one of those role, and should be able to access portfolio belongs to his or her business unit, right? Now, if the same user goes to the projects, right? On the project table, we have an ACL says, I want to get my access based on my portfolio. So as a team, as a user, you are logged into an instance, and if you see 3 portfolio has 2 projects are assigned to each of the portfolio. When you go to the project level, you should be able to see 6 projects. But as a Pratik, if I'm logging to the instance and if my business unit only has 1 portfolio and 1 project assigned to it, I can go to the project table and I can see only 1 project belonging to me. So I'm not duplicating that role and everything on the project level, but I'm saying that based on my whatever I can access in the portfolio level, show me related projects assigned to those portfolios.
And the actual technical way of doing that is, do you create an ACL at the project level and link it to an ACL at the portfolio level? Is that how you give that relationship?
So we have a new condition in the ACL with role script data condition and a security attribute. We have this 5th condition which is called control by reference. So you create a ACL on the project level. When you click on the control by reference, you will be able to pick all the reference column in your project table. So you can pick a portfolio and say, and we will delegate access from the portfolio to project.
Oh, okay. Wow. So then if you were going to allow access for the cost center, you could use the cost center a reference up to the project field, and you create an ACL there. And so all of the logic is held here at the portfolio, but you are just linking ACLs at these subtables to that ultimate portfolio set of security attributes, roles, and contextual requirements. Yeah.
Yes, that makes it very simple and manageable. It reduces a lot of administrative tasks for someone creating multiple ACLs, duplicating logic at all the tables. You can just create one ACLs and you build a hierarchy of access to the data.
That's good. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I'll have to go and update my course. So I put together an ACL course actually on Teachable, but I'll now have to put that in because I'd done it just at the start of Yokohama, just before Yokohama. So I wasn't aware of that, but I'll add that in there now. Hey, Pratik, thank you. It's been really interesting. I think people will get will learn a lot by watching this episode. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.